Hey there, sleepless rabble. Let me take over for a while. Tonight we're heading into the kind of forest people don't walk through. They vanish into it. No signs, no cell signal, no friendly bird song. Just silence that presses against your chest, and trees that seem a little too still. Some say it's haunted, others say it's cursed. But the truth? It's quieter and heavier than all of that. No cheap horror, no fake drama. Just a slow descent into one of the world's strangest places. And we'll walk it the Napmax way. Softly, curiously, and with a pinch of dry humor to keep the darkness at arm's length. If that's your vibe, hit like, tap subscribe, or toss a coin to kofi.com/napmax to keep these stories coming. Question of the night. Do you think a place can remember the people who disappear inside it? This is Napmax Sleep Stories. Let's begin. If forests had publicists, Aokigahara's must have died of shame somewhere around 1993. This isn't the kind of forest you find in children's books. No friendly owls, no sun-dappled glades, no wholesome picnics under a cherry blossom. No, Aokigahara is the forest your GPS prays you don't ask about. It's got a nickname you can't PR spin out of existence. The Suicide Forest. Even if you've never set foot in Japan, chances are you've heard about it. Maybe you stumbled across a Reddit thread full of shaky iPhone photos. Maybe you watched a low-effort ghost hunting video with lots of fake gasps and zero respect. Or maybe you heard about that YouTuber who strolled in with a camera crew and a complete lack of moral compass. But here's the thing. Aokigahara didn't ask for this reputation. It didn't put up a neon sign saying, "All ye who despair, enter here." It just existed. And people came. Nestled at the northwest base of Mount Fuji, Japan's Instagram darling. The forest sprawls across 35 square kilometers like a dark green bruise on the tourist map. It's ancient, but not fairy tale ancient. It was born out of fire and violence, specifically the massive eruption of Mount Fuji in the year 864. The lava cooled, the moss crept in, and over centuries the trees grew tall, twisted, and close together. So close they block out the sun like it's a scam. The result? A forest that doesn't feel like it's part of the world. It absorbs sound. It eats light. Birds don't sing here, not because they're dead, but because they have better taste. The air itself feels thick, not humid, just heavy. Like the atmosphere has decided to lean on your shoulders a little. People say it's peaceful. People lie. What it is, and what makes it so infamous, is how well it hides things. Trails vanish after 10 steps. Footpaths spiral off into nowhere. GPS devices stop working. Compasses go haywire. And even seasoned hikers have admitted to getting turned around in places that look exactly like the last place, and the next place, and every other place. You'd think all forests do that. Not like this. Aokigahara doesn't feel infinite. It feels recursive. Like walking into a loop that forgot how to let you out. And into this very quiet, very uncanny forest, people disappear. Not by accident, not usually. They come here to die. Or at least to think about it very seriously, without interruption. And Aokigahara doesn't interrupt. That's part of the problem. Before we go any deeper, here's a fact no one likes to say out loud. Japan has one of the highest suicide rates in the developed world. For decades, it's struggled with mental health stigma, brutal work culture, social isolation, and the dark little societal messages that whisper, "Don't burden others with your sadness." Enter Aokigahara, a place that doesn't ask anything of you. No one judging, No one watching, just trees, silence, and enough distance from the world that your phone won't even ring. It's not just a forest, it's a symbol of pain, of pressure, of the places where grief goes when it has nowhere else to be. But the forest didn't invent this role. It didn't advertise it. It was assigned by pop culture, by media, and by a few books we'll get to soon, turning this quiet stretch of moss and shadow into a mythic death zone. And when something becomes a myth, people stop treating it like a place. They start treating it like a spectacle. That's where things get messy. Because the forest doesn't just attract the lost, it attracts the curious, the disrespectful, and the kind of people who treat other people's pain as content. And yet, despite all this, Aokigahara endures. The trees keep growing. The moss keeps crawling. The forest says nothing. It doesn't defend itself. It doesn't explain. Which is why we're here. To do what the forest won't. To strip away the drama, ignore the jump scares, and figure out what the hell is actually going on under that thick green canopy. And spoiler, it's a lot. You can blame Mount Fuji for this mess. Back in 864, it blew its majestic top in a way that would make a Hollywood disaster movie jealous. Lava poured down the northwestern flank and cooled into a chaotic, jagged underlayer that would one day become the forest we now pretend to understand. Aokigahara wasn't gently born. It wasn't a fairy tale forest that grew out of fertile soil, kissed by dew and sunlight. It came from fire, destruction, and what followed was strange. The terrain here is, in technical terms, a volcanic hellscape dressed in moss. Under the thick green carpet lies a treacherous labyrinth of hollow lava tubes, uneven rock formations, and sudden sinkholes. Nothing is flat. Nothing is friendly. You're either stepping over roots that have grown like petrified snakes, or stumbling into a depression that wasn't there 2 seconds ago. And then there's the sound, or the lack of it. Aokigahara is unnervingly silent. You'd think birds would break the tension. They don't. Animals avoid this place. Even the wind seems to hesitate at the tree line. Once you're inside, it's just you, your breath, your footsteps, and the distinct sound of your nervous system whispering, "What the FECK are we doing here?" This isn't metaphor. It's acoustic reality. The thick, mossy undergrowth and dense trees act like soundproof padding. Your voice doesn't travel. There's no echo. It's the kind of silence that forces your brain to invent things to fill the void. And don't count on technology to save you. Those magnetic minerals in the volcanic rock, they screw with compasses. You think you're heading north, but your needle's just having a bad day. GPS, spotty at best. Phones, only useful as flashlights, and even then, good luck if you drop it in a crevice. If you ever wanted to get lost in a place that actively encourages you to get lost, this is it. Aokigahara doesn't just fail to help you. It seems to take a kind of polite pleasure in watching you spiral. It's like that emotionally detached friend who offers you tea instead of actual advice while your life falls apart. Helpful? Number present? Yes. Judging you silently? Absolutely. That's why the forest feels wrong in a way you can't quite explain. It's not just dark, it's off. The light filtering through the canopy doesn't look right. It's muted, diffused, greenish, like you're walking through a memory instead of a place. The trees don't move like they should. There's no rustling, no natural rhythm. You're walking through a still life. A diorama of what a forest used to be, back when it had more to say. And yet, despite all of this, people keep entering. Some are tourists. Some are hikers who think they're above the creepiness. Some are there for darker reasons. But regardless of why they come, they all step into the same silence, the same disorientation, the same strange weight pressing down from the canopy. Some people describe the feeling as peaceful. That's because they got out. Others describe it as watched. That's because they stayed too long. And honestly, the forest doesn't care either way. It doesn't try to stop you. It doesn't try to help you. It just is. And that is exactly why it became what it is. But that reputation didn't grow on its own. Someone, or something, had to plant the seed. And in Aokigahara's case, it wasn't a ghost or a curse or an ancient legend. It was a novel. And that's where we go next. If Aokigahara could talk, it would probably sue for defamation. Because this forest didn't set out to become a meme-worthy death trap. It wasn't born haunted. It didn't apply for the role of world's most suicidal woodland. That reputation, heavy, grotesque, and weirdly clickbaity, was built word by word, story by story, headline by headline. And it started, of course, with a book. In 1960, Japanese author Seicho Matsumoto published a novel called Kuroi Jukai, literally the Black Sea of Trees. It's a romantic tragedy in the Shakespearean sense, but with less balcony and more finality. In it, two lovers, bound by the kind of despair that makes you write poetry in lowercase, walk into Aokigahara and end their lives together beneath the trees. It was, to put it lightly, a hit. Critically acclaimed, widely read, culturally significant, and totally not intended to be a travel brochure for suicide. But humans being what we are, fragile, suggestible, and occasionally idiotic, the novel resonated with people for reasons far beyond what Matsumoto likely imagined. The idea of the forest as a peaceful, natural place to die entered the public consciousness like a splinter, small, sharp, and impossible to ignore once embedded. Then came the second blow, 1993, and another book that really should never have been published in a functioning society. Wataru Tsurumi's The Complete Manual of Suicide was exactly what it sounds like. A disturbingly detailed how-to guide that reviewed different methods of ending your life, complete with a weird, clinical, star rating system. Aokigahara, 5 stars, quiet, remote, easy to vanish. A perfect place to die, it said. Tsurumi later insisted that his intention wasn't to encourage death, but to give people control over their own choices. Japan's free speech laws protected him. The public bought the book. A lot. And once again, the forest was named. This time not in fiction, but in cold, blunt non-fiction, with diagrams. Let's be clear, the forest didn't change. People's idea of it did. Aokigahara stopped being just a place. It became an option. Suddenly it was no longer just a moss-covered stretch of volcanic woodland. It was a whispered solution, a setting, a conclusion, and worse, a suggestion passed from one hurting person to another, like a cigarette at the edge of a cliff. And then the media got involved. Because nothing says responsible journalism like dragging camera crews into a forest known for suicide and broadcasting footage of crime scene tape like it's an exotic wildlife special. News outlets began treating Aokigahara like a seasonal event. Death counts rise in spring. Body found hanging near tourist trail. Suicide forest claims another victim. They'd send reporters in with flashlights and solemn expressions. They'd interview locals with lines like, "You can feel the spirits." They'd play spooky music over B-roll footage of fog creeping through trees. The narrative locked in. This wasn't a forest anymore. It was a character. and a cursed one. The thing is, Aokigahara was never nameless. Long before modern authors got their hands on it, the place had spiritual weight. It was called Jukai, Sea of Trees, and had long been associated with supernatural energy, sacred ground, and the Japanese concept of yūrei, ghosts, but we'll get to them in the next chapter. But nobody outside Japan cared about that part, because the modern world doesn't like complicated stories. It likes digestible horror, simple tragedy, viral sadness, cue the rise of dark tourism. Because of course, we had to go there. People started traveling to Aokigahara not to die, but to look, to poke, to take selfies with warning signs and make TikToks about spooky vibes. YouTubers wandered in with shaky GoPros and zero cultural understanding. Paranormal investigators treated it like an amusement park haunted house. The forest became content. And then, in 2018, came the lowest of the low, Logan Paul. If the forest had a spirit animal, Logan Paul would be the raccoon it can't get rid of. He entered Aokigahara with a camera crew, filmed a body, and laughed on screen, then uploaded it. To Millionaire. His audience, many of them children, got a crash course in human indecency. He apologized. Eventually, YouTube took the video down. Eventually. But the damage was done. If there had ever been a line between grief and entertainment, he drove a bulldozer through it. The Japanese public was outraged. The world reacted. The term suicide forest hit Google Trends like a meteor. And Aokigahara's reputation, already grim, calcified into something uglier. Something voyeuristic. It wasn't just a symbol of pain anymore. It was a spectacle. Meanwhile, local officials tried to clean up the mess, figuratively and literally. The government stopped releasing annual suicide statistics from the forest in 2010, hoping that the absence of data would cool the narrative. Signs were placed near trailheads, urging people to seek help. Police patrols increased. Local volunteers began walking the forest daily, not to arrest or harass anyone, but to talk, to say, "You don't have to do this," to offer something human in a place that had become so terribly symbolic. But the myth was already too strong, because once a place becomes legend, once it gets a nickname like Suicide Forest and shows up in BuzzFeed listicles and paranormal podcasts, it stops being real. It becomes an idea. And that's harder to dismantle than any tree. Because Aokigahara isn't just a forest with a bad reputation. It's a spirit trap. Not officially, of course. Japan doesn't put that on signs. But anyone even slightly sensitive to energy or emotionally literate really will tell you this forest doesn't feel empty. Aokigahara is full, not of noise, not of people, but of residue. Something hangs in the air here. Something old, unspoken, and deeply uncomfortable. It's not horror movie haunted. It's not theatrical. It's something worse. Subtle. And Japan has a name for it. Yūrei. The restless dead. Let's clarify. For the Western readers raised on horror films with bad pacing and worse wigs, a yūrei is not your average Casper. They're not here to help solve mysteries or give you closure. They're not evil either. Not really. They're incomplete. Yūrei are spirits of people who died traumatically or with unfinished business. And crucially, without the proper rites. No prayers, no closure, no spiritual GPS to guide them to wherever it is we're meant to go. So they linger. In the place where it happened. Trapped not by force, but by feeling. And Aokigahara is, spiritually speaking, a 5-star yūrei hotel. Perfect conditions, tragic deaths, high emotional charge, minimal human interference, and a dense natural environment that absorbs and holds energy like a sponge soaked in grief. According to tradition, these spirits are easy to spot, metaphorically, if not literally. They wear white funeral garments, have long black hair, think Sadako before pop culture ruined her, and often appear with no feet. Why? Because they're not grounded. Literally. They hover. Emotionally, energetically, and in some sightings, physically. Now, you don't have to see them to feel them. Most people who walk the deeper trails of Aokigahara report a sensation of being watched. Not followed, not stalked, just noticed. Like you've entered someone else's home without knocking. There are also reports of cold spots, sudden temperature drops that make no meteorological sense. And no, it's not just the shade, it's selective. You walk past one tree and suddenly it's freezing. You step 2 meters away and the air is normal again. Nature doesn't work like that, but trauma does. Search teams, the ones who still speak publicly anyway, tell of strange sounds in the underbrush. Footsteps that don't match the living. Whispers that don't carry like sound should. Some even claim to have been lured off the path by voices. Not ghostly wails, but conversational tones. Software persuasive. Familiar. Are they lying? Dramatizing? Maybe. But that doesn't explain the consistency. Different people, different times, same phenomena. And in Japan, that's taken seriously. Because here's the thing. In Japanese spiritual culture, ghosts aren't taboo. They're not fiction. They're not Halloween decorations. They're part of life. Death doesn't erase you. It transforms you. And if that transformation gets interrupted, you stay. That's not superstition. That's structure. Aokigahara has centuries of energetic history behind it. Even before it became synonymous with suicide, it had a reputation as a spirit forest. Some say it was used for ubasut, the old practice of abandoning elderly relatives to die in remote places during times of famine. The historical truth of that is debated, but the symbolic weight stuck. A place of quiet endings, of disposals, of being left. Add to that the deaths of hundreds, possibly thousands, of people over decades, many of them alone, in despair, without burial, prayer, or remembrance. And what do you get? A forest heavy with unresolved emotion. Not evil, not cursed, just congested. Some spiritual practitioners describe it as a thin place, where the veil between the worlds is less of a veil and more of a polite suggestion. The border between this life and whatever comes next feels thinner here. Not because of demons or portals or flashy rituals, just because so many people pass through in a state of deep rupture. Death in despair is sticky. It clings. It repeats. It becomes part of the landscape. And the forest, being what it is, still soft and closed to noise, holds it all like a secret it doesn't know how to release, which brings us to a difficult question. Are the spirits stuck here, or are they choosing to stay? That's not rhetorical. Some believe that yūrei can't leave until they've been acknowledged, that the act of being seen, heard, or prayed for allows them to move on. Others argue that these spirits choose to remain as a form of protest, a kind of metaphysical hell no to a world that failed them in life, a refusal to fade quietly. There are Buddhist monks who visit the forest to perform purification rituals, simple chants, prayers, incense offerings, not for the living, but for the unseen. It's not theatrics, it's maintenance, because even ghosts need to be reminded they're not alone. And maybe that's the scariest part of Aokigahara. Not that it's haunted, but that it might be rightfully haunted. Not by monsters, but by memory, by grief so strong it outlasts breath, by people who didn't want to be forgotten and got their wish, just not the way they imagined. Not everyone who walks into Aokigahara is trying to die. Some are trying to help. They're the volunteers, the rangers, the police officers. They go in quietly, usually in pairs, no press, no announcements, just long sleeves, rope, radios, and a mutual agreement not to talk too much about what they've seen. Because what they've seen doesn't always behave like it wants to be seen. Officially, these are search parties. Unofficially, they're ghost chasers. Not because they believe in spirits, but because they have to walk through the aftershocks of people who left this world without finishing what they came here to do. Their job is simple. Find the living and convince them not to die. Find the dead and remove them before the animals do. Find everything else and try not to take it home with them. They rarely speak publicly, but over the years, anonymous reports have surfaced, blogs, interviews, forum posts, and whispers from those who no longer work the forest beat. Patterns emerge. Most say the same thing. It's not the bodies that get to you, it's the absence period. See, when you find a body, there's procedure, there's closure, there's paperwork. But most of the time, you don't find bodies, you find traces, like tents. Some collapsed, some still zipped. Sometimes with food wrappers, toothbrushes, cigarettes burned halfway through, signs of hesitation. People come here to decide, and sometimes they take their time. They sleep, they sit, they think, and then, one morning, they don't come back. Sometimes there are shoes, placed neatly side by side, a deliberate arrangement, quiet, almost ceremonial. Sometimes there are wallets, opened and left face up, IDs visible, like the dead wanted to be found, not forgotten. And then there's the tape. Walk far enough into the forest, and you'll start to see it. Ribbons of plastic, cloth or string, tied to tree trunks, winding through the undergrowth like a breadcrumb trail for people who don't fully trust their final decision. Some tapes lead back to the path. Some don't. Some simply stop, fluttering in a place where the ground is uneven and the branches above are just a little too still. Veteran searchers say they can read the tone of a trail. Bright, fresh tape. Someone still thinking. Old, frayed, sagging in the damp air. Probably too late. And then there are the trails that loop. Endless spirals of red string circling the same trees. As if the person walked in mental circles before disappearing into one. One former ranger wrote anonymously, "The forest doesn't hide bodies, it absorbs them. You can walk past a corpse 10 times and not see it until the 11th. And even then, it's only because something wants to be found." They speak of areas that feel wrong. Not dangerous, just heavy. Like walking into a room where someone had a fight, but no one tells you what it was about. Some refuse to enter those sections at all. They say it's not fear, it's respect. Others talk about things that don't fit inside reports, radios that start crackling when they shouldn't, batteries that drain after full charges, sudden waves of nausea that vanish after stepping 10 feet away, a persistent feeling that someone is standing just behind them, always just out of frame. And here's the uncomfortable part. These aren't ghost hunters. These are cops, rangers, people with day jobs and pensions, and no desire to go viral for spooky stories. They carry out the dead, sometimes in pieces, sometimes after days of decay in the wet air. They do it with gloves, with masks, with procedural efficiency, but the weight is never just physical. There's a reason some teams leave coins at the base of certain trees. A reason others mutter prayers under their breath. A reason no one wants to be the last one out at sunset. Because sometimes, long after the body's gone, the feeling stays. And they've learned slowly, unofficially, quietly, that it's better to acknowledge that feeling than to pretend it isn't watching. You don't have to believe in ghosts to respect what a place like Aokigahara becomes after housing that much unspoken grief. But if you spend enough time with the people who walk its trails for a living, you'll notice they all carry a little silence with them, even when they leave. There's a kind of haunting that doesn't throw plates or slam doors. It doesn't appear in night vision. It doesn't scream. It doesn't even need to show up. It just shifts the atmosphere. A recalibration of space. A pressure behind your eyes. The sense that you've walked into a conversation you weren't invited to. And the silence that follows was about you. This is the kind of haunting people report in Aokigahara. Not the cinematic kind. The ancient kind. The passive-aggressive kind, where nothing attacks you because it doesn't have to. Let's talk about voices, not whispers, not wails. Voices. Clear, calm, human. The most common account is this. A lone hiker or a search team or a morbidly curious tourist with a camera and a bad idea hears a voice calling out from deep in the trees or just off the path. It usually says something generic. Hey, or over here. Sometimes it's a question. Sometimes it's their name. Here's the kicker. When they follow it, nothing's there. And the voice doesn't repeat. It doesn't feel malicious. It feels neutral, observing, almost familiar. Some believe it's residual energy, a recording of someone's final words, playing on repeat like a broken vinyl stuck in the trees. Others think it's more deliberate, that the spirits want interaction, not revenge, just acknowledgement. See me, hear me, find me. Searchers sometimes refuse to follow these voices, not because they're afraid of ghosts, they're afraid of getting lost. Aokigahara doesn't like people wandering. It's already too good at making them disappear. Then there are the footsteps. Not echoes, not animals. Actual human-paced footsteps. Behind, to the side. Never quite close enough to catch. Never quite far enough to dismiss. People stop. Turn. Nothing. Walk again. The steps start again. It's unnerving, not because it's loud, but because it matches you. Like something is mimicking you. Or worse, shadowing you. You don't feel hunted. You feel accompanied. And that's somehow worse. And then there's the pull. Ask enough locals and you'll hear it. The forest pulls some people in. They don't mean it metaphorically. It's described as a physical sensation, like gravity reassigning itself. People step off marked paths for no logical reason. They stop noticing they're going the wrong way. They forget to turn back, one foot in front of the other, guided by a feeling with no source. Sometimes the person gets found. Sometimes just their tent. Sometimes just their tape, broken off mid-tree, as if something cut it on purpose. That's why visitors, especially the ones who aren't just TikTok idiots, often bring protection. Not bear spray, not knives, spiritual tools. It's not unusual to find. Salt circles around tent perimeters. Mirrors tied to trees to confuse spirits. Amulets from Shinto shrines. Crude talismans made from twigs, cigarettes, and string. Some even perform quiet rituals before entering. Prayers, mantras, incense smudging. Not because they're superstitious, because they've felt something, and they'd rather not piss it off. Then there's the time distortion. People report feeling like they've been walking for hours, only for their watch to show 20 minutes. Others lose all sense of direction, despite being experienced hikers. One searcher claimed they walked past the same tree 3 times, despite walking in a straight line. They only realized it was the same tree because of the object tied to it. A plastic Hello Kitty keychain, sun-bleached and dangling like a warning. Time in Aokigahara is not friendly. It stretches, compresses, loops. It behaves like memory, unstable, emotional, and deeply unreliable. But perhaps the strangest thing about all these reports is how unremarkable they seem to the people who tell them. No drama, no need to convince you. Just flat, calm recounting of moments that didn't follow the rules of normal space. There's a quiet consensus among those who've spent real time in the forest. Something is in there. Not something evil, not even something sentient. Just something. Holding stories, holding pain, holding the last trace of hundreds of people who left more behind than they meant to. It doesn't need to scream. The silence is loud enough. Here's the uncomfortable theory no one wants to say out loud. Maybe Aokigahara isn't haunted because people die there. Maybe people die there because it's haunted. Or, more precisely, because it's charged. Forget horror movie rules. Forget Catholic demonology, Western ghost tropes, EMF meters, and dramatic possession scenes. That's not how this forest works. There's nothing theatrical about it. There's no villain here. But what if the forest is more than just an observer? What if it's become something closer to a battery? You see, emotion leaves marks. Places remember things. Ask anyone who's walked into an abandoned hospital, a war site, a home where something terrible happened. The furniture might be gone, the people too, but the weight? Still there. Aokigahara has absorbed more death than most cities, more grief, more fear, more quiet, deliberate endings. And trees, strange as it sounds, are incredible conductors of that kind of energy. They hold still. They outlive. They surround and seal in whatever gets dropped between their roots. The monks who have done spiritual work in Aokigahara don't speak in horror terms. They don't call it evil. They use words like dense, closed, unresolved. Some say it's like a mirror, that it reflects back whatever is unresolved in you. Others describe it as sick land, not because it's cursed, but because it's taken in more than it knows how to release. If you believe in energy theory, and let's be honest, in a place like this, it's harder not to, then Aokigahara makes perfect sense. It's been saturated. Death is not just something that happens here. It's something that echoes here. Some psychics claim the forest has developed what feels like a personality. Not a consciousness in the way we think of it. Not a mind. But a presence. It's described as non-hostile, but indifferent. Not malevolent, not welcoming, just watchful. And very, very old. One spiritual medium described it like this. It feels like walking into a place that already knows what you're thinking and doesn't plan to stop you. Which sounds poetic, until you realize how many people bring their final decisions here. Not for validation, but for silence. And the forest offers exactly that. It doesn't argue, it doesn't scream, it simply opens. There's also the question of loops. Several energy workers have described Aokigahara as a kind of repeating pattern. Not literally in time, but emotionally. The same types of people return. The same areas draw them in. The same objects get left behind. Shoes, notes, rope, tape, offerings. The forest, in this theory, has become a closed circuit, a spiritual feedback loop. Trauma feeds silence. Silence attracts pain. Pain deepens the trauma. Repeat. It's not causing anything. It's just not stopping it. Because it can't. Or it won't. And to be fair, no one really knows how to clear a space like this. You can't just burn sage and call it a day. You can't chant away the grief of generations. And when the land itself becomes a container for despair, for fear, for soul-deep confusion, what do you do? Some monks walk the trails and offer prayers. Some leave rice balls or sake under specific trees. Some won't enter at all. The most chilling theory isn't that the forest is haunted. It's that the forest has become too good at what it was never meant to do. It holds space too well. It gives people what the world doesn't. Privacy, stillness, no judgment, no interruptions. And in doing so, it accidentally became a sanctuary for sorrow. Not because it wanted to, because no one else did. Let's drop the mystery for a moment. Aokigahara didn't just become Japan's most notorious suicide site because it was quiet and full of trees. That helped, sure. But the real roots of this tragedy run through offices, classrooms, kitchens, and alleyways. Because in Japan, suicide isn't just a personal tragedy, it's a cultural pressure point. For decades, Japan has held one of the highest suicide rates in the developed world. Even in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, it remained one of the leading causes of death, especially among men, teenagers, and the elderly. The reasons aren't simple. It's not just depression, not just mental illness. This isn't a story about individuals. It's about systems. From early on, Japanese people are taught one thing: don't be a burden. The concept of gamen, enduring silently, is built into daily life. You don't complain. You don't break down in public. You don't ask for help unless absolutely necessary. Everything difficult gets packed in and zipped shut. Then comes school. Competitive, strict, exhausting. Then work. Hierarchical, punishing, all-consuming. And if you can't keep up, if you fall behind, burn out, or break down, you vanish. Quietly. Hopefully without disturbing anyone else. Japan's relationship with suicide is not Western. There's no religious guilt, no hellfire warnings, there's history and structure. The samurai, for example, died by their own hands, ritual suicide called seppuku, to preserve honor. It was seen as noble, controlled, final. That logic still echoes today. Suicide, for some, becomes an act of responsibility. A man who can't provide might think his family is better off with the insurance payout. A bullied teen might believe her death will free her parents from shame. An older person might decide they've become useless and leave without a word. It doesn't mean these ideas are true, but they feel true, and that's enough. Then there's hikikomori, people who shut themselves off from the world. No job, no school, no social interaction, just a bedroom, a screen, and silence. There are over 1 million of them. Most aren't suicidal, but the ones who are often vanish quietly. And where do you go when you want to disappear in a country that doesn't talk about pain? You go to a place where the silence feels like it belongs. And then there's karoshi, death by overwork. Yes, it's a real word. Some people die from it literally. Strokes, heart attacks. Others burn out emotionally, crushed under pressure from jobs that demand everything and reward nothing. And when they finally break, there's no open space to talk about it. There's just shame. And shame kills quietly. Japan has tried to help. There are suicide hotlines, posters in train stations, patrols in Aokigahara, signs at the forest entrance. Your life is a precious gift. Think of your family. But it's all done softly, politely. No national reckoning. No cultural shift. No room to shout. Just the same expectation. Hold it in. Don't make a scene. And when the silence becomes too heavy, people look for somewhere even quieter. Somewhere that doesn't judge, doesn't interrupt. Somewhere like Aokigahara. This forest is not cursed. It's a mirror. It reflects a country's pain, invisible in daily life, but very, very visible in the trees. And the worst part? The forest never asked for it. It just stayed still while the world projected everything onto it. Aokigahara is not a theme park. There are no tickets, no guided tours with headsets, no gift shops selling fridge magnets that say, "I survived the suicide forest." And yet, that's exactly how some people treat it. Over the last few decades, the forest has become a magnet, not just for the lost and the suffering, but for the curious, the bored, and the deeply inappropriate. People come here looking for stories, but too many come here looking for content. It starts with the usual: a hike, a dare, a few too many paranormal YouTube videos, a tourist who just wants to see what it feels like. They bring cameras, snacks, and a vague idea that they're entering something spooky but harmless. They're not. They step past the warning signs, roll their eyes at the caution tape, and start filming. The goal? A moody video. Maybe a ghost sighting. Maybe a clickbait thumbnail with bold red text that says, "We found a body." And sometimes they do. Let's talk about Logan Paul. Yes, him. The bleach blonde content machine who, in 2018, wandered into Aokigahara with a full camera crew and filmed the body of a man who had died by suicide. He laughed. He posted it. Millions watched. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't respectful. It was the worst case scenario of what happens when dark tourism meets ego. The backlash was huge. He apologized. Sort of. The video was taken down. Eventually. But the stain remained. Aokigahara was suddenly viral again. And more importantly, it became profitable. People started tagging the forest in ghost hunting TikToks. New creators rushed to make response videos. And somewhere under all that content, the actual people, the ones who had died, were buried all over again. So let's ask the uncomfortable question. Should anyone be visiting at all? That depends. Some people go because they're grieving, because someone they loved was found here, because they want to understand. Others go quietly. Spiritual practitioners, monks, people doing prayer work, energy workers, journalists. They don't disturb. They don't document. They walk, sense, offer something, and leave. But then there's the rest. The ghost chasers, the bored backpackers, the dead-eyed vloggers hoping for a real reaction. That's when it becomes a problem. Because walking through someone else's pain isn't automatically meaningful. Sometimes it's just exploitation with hiking boots. There's a term for this: dark tourism. It refers to travel to places associated with death, tragedy, and human suffering. Battlefields, concentration camps, genocide memorials, and yes, suicide sites. And dark tourism isn't inherently bad. It can be powerful, educational, necessary, but there's a line. And Aokigahara tests it. Because this forest doesn't exist to be understood. It exists because no one did understand when it mattered. So if you're going to visit, or even just think about visiting, ask yourself this: why? Not in a cute Instagram caption way, in a real way. Are you looking for silence or spectacle, respect, or rush? Because the forest will accept either. It won't stop you. It doesn't care. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't. If you leave the forest the way you came in, it's almost disappointing. The trees thin. The air lifts. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slams. The world returns, unbothered by what you've been walking through. You pass the signs again, the ones that tell you life is a gift, and to think of your family, and you wonder, not for the first time, whether anyone has ever turned around because of them. Most don't. Because by the time people reach this place, they've already walked through the real forest. The internal one. The one with no paths and no signs and no clearings. Aokigahara isn't the beginning of anything. It's a final page. A last chapter written in moss and shadow. And the people who come here often do so because it matches something inside them. The silence. The stillness. The absence of demand. This forest doesn't ask questions. It doesn't give advice. It doesn't rush to solve anything. It's the one place that lets you unravel without interruption. And for some, that's not terrifying. It's comforting. What Aokigahara leaves behind isn't always physical. Sure, there are the objects, the shoes, the tents, the ribbon trails that stop midair like a breath held too long. But more than that, it leaves impressions. Ghosts, yes. But not just the kind that hover behind trees. The kind that follow you back in your own silence. The kind you hear when you can't sleep. People who've walked the forest often say they dream differently after. Their bodies return, but something small, a thought, a heaviness, a question with no sentence, stays behind. Not in fear, in recognition. Because places can carry pain, but they also reflect it. And maybe the most honest thing about Aokigahara is that it never pretends otherwise. We love to give places meaning. We call them cursed, haunted, sacred. We build stories around them because that's how we make the unbearable into something we can name. But Aokigahara doesn't want your language. It doesn't need your explanations. It simply holds what was left there. Grief, confusion, the unbearable silence of being alone in a world that won't stop talking. You can spend your whole life avoiding the question, and still feel it when you stand among those trees. What does it mean to be gone and not missed? To be quiet and not heard? To ask for help without knowing the words? Maybe that's why people keep coming. Not for the myth, not for the ghosts, but because something inside them is trying to match the frequency of a place that doesn't speak, only listens. What the forest leaves behind isn't horror. It's understanding. Too late, maybe, but clear. And if you hear it, truly hear it, you don't leave unchanged. You leave quieter. And that silence, you carry it, just like the forest does. And that's where we leave it. If you've made it this far, maybe you're sitting in the dark with a cup of tea gone cold. Or maybe you're half asleep, drifting somewhere between thoughts and trees. Either way, thanks for being here. Thanks for staying curious, even when the topic is heavy. Especially then. If you want more stories like this, slow, strange, and made for those of us who'd rather feel something real than scroll past another filter, you know what to do. Tap follow, drop a like, or support the channel over at kofi.com/napmax. And here's a question. If you're still with me, have you ever been in a place that felt aware of you? Let me know in the comments. If not for the algorithm, then for the echo. This is Napmax Sleep Stories. Thanks for listening. Sleep well, or don't. The forest isn't going anywhere.